The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop, throwing Willa Zimmerman against the wooden frame hard enough to bruise her shoulder. And when she finally stumbled out into the dusty street of Laramie, Wyoming, clutching the tattered remains of what was supposed to be her map to a new life, she realized the address she had memorized so carefully had been torn away along with half the paper. It was August 1882, and the heat beat down mercilessly on the unpaved Main Street. Willa stood there in her travel-worn blue dress, her dark blonde hair escaping from its pins after 3 weeks of rattling across the country from Boston. The other passengers hurried past her, eager to reach their destinations, but she remained frozen, staring at the useless scrap in her trembling hands. She had paid everything she owned for this chance. Responded to an advertisement for a mail-order bride. Corresponded with a man named Gerald Patterson, who owned a dry goods store somewhere in Laramie. He had seemed kind in his letters, promising a comfortable home and respect. But the crucial detail of where exactly that home was located had been on the portion of the map, now lost somewhere between here and Nebraska. The stagecoach driver dumped her trunk unceremoniously in the dirt and climbed back up to his seat. "This is Laramie, miss. End of the line for you." "Wait," Willa called out, her voice hoarse from dust and panic. "Do you know where I might find Gerald Patterson? He runs a dry goods store." The driver scratched his beard and shook his head. "There are 3 dry goods stores in town, miss. Cannot say I know all the proprietors by name." With a crack of his whip, the stagecoach rolled away, leaving her standing alone with her single trunk and her broken dreams on paper. Willa looked up and down the street. Laramie was bigger than she had imagined, with wooden buildings lining both sides of the wide thoroughfare. Signs proclaimed various businesses, saloons, hotels, and stores. Men on horseback trotted past, and a freight wagon rumbled by. No one paid her any attention except for a few curious glances. She needed to find Gerald Patterson, but she also needed to figure out where she would sleep tonight. The sun was already beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange. With determination born of desperation, she grabbed the handle of her trunk and began dragging it toward the nearest building that looked respectable, a hotel called the Silver Spur. The trunk was heavier than she remembered, and after only a few feet, her arms were aching. She stopped to catch her breath, and that was when she heard the voice. "That trunk looks about ready to win the fight." Willa turned to see a man leading a bay horse toward her. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His hat was pushed back, revealing dark hair and eyes that were a striking shade of gray-blue. He wore worn denim pants, a faded red shirt, and a leather vest. A revolver hung at his hip, but something about his expression was gentle, concerned rather than threatening. "I can manage," Willa said automatically, though they both knew it was not true. The man smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made her breath catch. "I am sure you could eventually, but the sun is going down and that trunk looks like it is full of rocks. Where are you headed?" "I do not know exactly," Willa admitted, and to her horror she felt tears pricking at her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. She had not cried during the entire journey from Boston, through her father's death 6 months ago, through selling everything to pay his debts, through the desperate decision to become a mail-order bride. She would not cry now in front of a stranger, but the stranger's expression softened further. "You are lost." "Not lost precisely. I know I am in Laramie, I just do not know where in Laramie I need to be." She held up the torn map. "This was supposed to guide me, but half of it is gone." The man tied his horse to a nearby post and walked closer. He smelled of leather and sage and something clean like rain. "May I?" She handed him the torn paper, and he studied it carefully. His brow furrowed in concentration, and Willa noticed he had a small scar above his left eyebrow, a thin white line against tan skin. "This shows the eastern part of town," he said finally. "But the part that is torn away, that would have been the specific address, I am guessing." "Yes. I am supposed to meet a man named Gerald Patterson. He owns a dry goods store." Something flickered across the stranger's face, too quick for her to read. "Gerald Patterson?" "Yes. Do you know him?" The man was quiet for a long moment, and Willa's heart began to sink. Finally, he said gently, "Miss, I am sorry to tell you this, but Gerald Patterson died 3 weeks ago." Hart gave out. They buried him up on the hill overlooking town. The world tilted. Willa grabbed for something to steady herself and found the stranger's arm under her hand, strong and solid. "He is dead." "I am afraid so. Were you supposed to meet him for some purpose?" Willa could not speak. She could only nod. Her last hope, her carefully planned future, her escape from poverty and loneliness, all of it crumbled to dust just like the map in her hand. "Miss, you look pale. Please let me help you to the hotel. You can sit down, get some water." "I cannot afford the hotel," Willa heard herself say from very far away. "I spent nearly everything on the journey here." The stranger muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse, but he said it so quietly she could not be sure. Then he made a decision. "My name is Austin Stark. I own a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. I am not going to leave you standing here in the street. Let me take you to the boarding house, at least for tonight. Mrs. Chen, who runs it, is fair and kind. We will figure something out." "I cannot accept charity from a stranger," Willa said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Then accept it from a neighbor. That is what we do out here, we help each other." Austin picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "Come on. We will get you settled, and tomorrow in daylight we will figure out your next step." Willa found herself following him, too numb and exhausted to argue. He led his horse with one hand and carried her trunk with the other, walking at a pace she could match. They went down a side street to a neat wooden building with a painted sign that read, "Chen's Boarding House." A small woman with graying black hair and a face that spoke of both China and hard prairie winters opened the door at Austin's knock. Her eyes took in the situation immediately. "This is Willa Zimmerman," Austin said. "She just arrived in town and has had some bad news. Can you put her up for tonight, Mrs. Chen? I will pay." "No," Willa found her voice. "I cannot let you do that, Mrs." Chen looked between them, then said in accented but clear English, "Come inside, both of you. We talk." The boarding house was clean and smelled of cooking, something with ginger and meat that made Willa's stomach remind her she had not eaten since dawn. "Mrs." Chen led them to a small sitting room and gestured for Willa to sit in an upholstered chair that had seen better days but was comfortable. "Now," Mrs. Chen said, "tell me what happened." The story came out in a rush. The advertisement for a mail-order bride. Gerald Patterson's letters that had seemed so kind. Her father's death and the debts. The long journey west. The lost map. And now, the final crushing blow that her intended husband was dead. Mrs. Chen listened without interrupting, her dark eyes thoughtful. When Willa finished, the older woman nodded slowly. "You have money for how many nights? Perhaps 2 if I am very careful. Then I will need to find work." "What kind of work can you do?" "I can read and write. I can do figures. I kept my father's books for his printing shop before he died. I can cook and clean and sew." "The school needs a teacher," Austin said suddenly. "Miss Porter is leaving to get married and move to Denver. They have been looking for someone to take her place." Mrs. Chen nodded. "This is true, but school board, they take time to decide. They want references, letters, proof of education." I have some of my father's papers, Willa said, a tiny spark of hope igniting. I helped him teach a class at our church in Boston. I could write to the minister there for a reference. That will take weeks, Austin pointed out. Mail does not move fast. Willa slumped back in the chair. Of course it would take weeks, and she had money for 2 nights, maybe 3 if she did not eat much. Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment. I make you offer. You work here, help me with cleaning, cooking, laundry. I give you room and food. Not much pay, but enough for necessities. You do this while you wait for references, while you apply for teaching position. If you get teaching job, good. If not, you still have place here as long as you work. Fair, it was more than fair. It was salvation. Yes, Willa said, her voice breaking with relief. Thank you, Mrs. Chen, thank you so much. The older woman smiled, transforming her stern face. We women, we must help each other. Men think they run world, but we know truth. She shot a glance at Austin, but her eyes were twinkling. Some men are good, though. Austin Stark is one of good ones. Austin looked uncomfortable with the praise. I will leave you to get settled, Miss Zimmerman. If you need anything, Mrs. Chen knows how to reach me. He stood, and Willa stood too, suddenly desperate not to let him leave. He was the only person she knew in this entire territory, and he had shown her nothing but kindness. Mr. Stark, I do not know how to thank you. No thanks needed. Welcome to Laramie, Miss Zimmerman. I hope you will come to like it here. He tipped his hat and left, and the room felt emptier without him. Mrs. Chen showed her to a small room at the back of the house. It had a narrow bed, a washstand, a small dresser, and a hook on the wall for hanging clothes. A single window looked out onto a vegetable garden. It was simple, but it was clean and safe, and Willa felt something in her chest loosen for the first time since her father had died. Rest tonight, Mrs. Chen said. Tomorrow we talk about work. For now I bring you food and you sleep. You look like you have not slept in days. It was true. Willa had been too worried, too tense, too afraid of what lay ahead to truly rest on the journey. Now, suddenly, the exhaustion hit her all at once. She nodded gratefully. Mrs. Chen brought her a bowl of noodles with vegetables and chicken, simple but delicious. Willa ate every bite, then washed her face and hands in the basin. She unpacked her nightgown and hung her few dresses in the small wardrobe, then fell into bed. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was of gray-blue eyes and a gentle smile. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of birds. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and panic fluttered in her chest. Then it all came back. Laramie, Mrs. Chen, Austin Stark. Gerald Patterson was dead, and her careful plans were ashes, but she was not alone and not on the street. It was enough. She dressed in her plainest dress, a gray cotton that was practical for work, and pinned her hair up securely. When she emerged from her room, she found Mrs. Chen already in the kitchen, a large room dominated by a massive stove. Good morning, Mrs. Chen said. You sleep well, better than I have in months. Thank you again for your kindness. No need to keep thanking. You will work hard, we will be even. Mrs. Chen handed her an apron. Today I show you the routine. We have 6 boarders besides you, mostly men who work in town. They want breakfast at 6, dinner at 6 in evening. Lunch they eat elsewhere. We keep house clean, do laundry on Monday and Thursday, change linens on Saturday. You understand? Yes, madam. Do not call me madam. Mrs. Chen is fine, or just Chen. Now, help me prepare breakfast. They worked together, and Willa found a rhythm she remembered from helping her mother years ago before illness had taken her. Mrs. Chen was efficient and expected the same, but she was not unkind. She explained things once and expected Willa to remember, which Willa appreciated. There was no coddling here, just honest work for honest pay. The boarders came down one by one. They were a mix of men, some young, some older. A clerk from the land office, a carpenter, a man who worked at the telegraph office, another who ran a freight business. They were polite to Willa, curious about the new face, but Mrs. Chen quickly made it clear that Willa was staff and under her protection. The men accepted this with good grace and focused on their food. After breakfast, there were dishes to wash, rooms to clean, vegetables to prepare for dinner. Willa worked steadily, grateful for the distraction. It kept her mind from dwelling on how drastically her life had changed in just 24 hours. Mid-morning, there was a knock at the front door. Mrs. Chen was upstairs, so Willa answered it, wiping her hands on her apron. Her heart gave an unexpected leap when she saw Austin Stark standing there, hat in hand. "Mr. Stark," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Good morning, Miss Zimmerman. I hope I am not disturbing you. I wanted to check that you were settled all right. Mrs. Chen has been very kind. I am working here in exchange for room and board." "That is good. I am glad." He shifted his weight, looking almost nervous, which seemed odd for a man who carried himself with such quiet confidence. "I also wanted to talk to you about the teaching position. I am on the school board. We meet tonight to discuss candidates. Would you be willing to come and speak with us tonight? But I have no references yet, no proof of my qualifications. Bring whatever you have. Papers from your father's shop, anything that shows your education. I will vouch for your character for what that is worth." "Mr. Stark, you barely know me. Why would you do this?" He met her eyes steadily. "Because you came all this way for a fresh start and you deserve a chance at it. Because we need a teacher and you are educated and well-spoken. And because—" He paused, then continued quietly, "because when I look at you, I see someone who is brave enough to cross a continent alone for a better life. That is the kind of person I want teaching our children." Willa felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I will come to the meeting. And thank you, Mr. Stark, again." "Austin," he said, "if we are going to be working together on the school board, you should call me Austin. Then you should call me Willa." He smiled, and there it was again, that transformation that made him devastatingly handsome. "Willa, it suits you. I will come by at 7 to take you to the meeting. It is at the church, just down the street, but I would feel better knowing you did not have to walk alone after dark." After he left, Willa stood in the doorway for a long moment, her hand pressed to her racing heart. Mrs. Chen appeared beside her, silent as a cat. "That man," Mrs. Chen said thoughtfully, "he is good man. Good ranch, works hard, fair to his workers, but he is lonely. He is not married, was engaged once 5 years ago. Girl decided ranch life was too hard, went back east. Broke his heart, but he does not talk about it. Since then, he keeps to himself mostly. Works his ranch, serves on school board and town council, helps his neighbors, but no woman." "That is sad," Willa said softly. Mrs. Chen gave her a sharp look. "Yes, very sad, but maybe things change, yes. Life has interesting ways." Willa spent the afternoon preparing for the meeting, going through her trunk for anything that might help her case. She found certificates from her own schooling, a letter from the minister praising her work with the children's reading class, even some examples of the primers she had helped her father print. It was not much, but it was something. At precisely 7 o'clock, Austin knocked on the door. Willa had changed into her best dress, a dark green that brought out her eyes. She had taken extra care with her hair, pinning it up in a neat coil. Mrs. Chen had lent her a shawl for the cooling evening air. "You look very nice," Austin said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush again. "Thank you. I confess I am nervous." "Do not be. Just be yourself. Answer their questions honestly. They are fair men for the most part." The church was a simple wooden building with a tall steeple. Inside, several men were already gathered in the front pews. Austin introduced her to each one. There was Mr. Harrison, who ran the general store, Mr. Sullivan, a lawyer, Reverend Matthews, who served the church, Mr. Chen, who turned out to be Mrs. Chen's husband and ran a freight business, and Mr. Cooper, a rancher from the north side of the valley. They asked her questions about her education, her experience, her plans for teaching. She answered as best she could, keeping her voice steady even though her palms were sweating. She showed them her papers, explained her father's printing business and how she had helped with educational materials. "Miss Zimmerman," Mr. Sullivan said, "I will be direct. You have limited formal teaching experience. We have had 3 other candidates, all with more experience. Why should we choose you?" Willa took a breath. "Because I love learning and I love helping others discover that same love. Because I understand that children out here need practical knowledge as well as classical education. Because I am willing to work hard and adapt to what your community needs. And because," she met his eyes steadily, "I have nowhere else to go, which means I will not leave you without a teacher in the middle of the school year because a better opportunity came along." There was silence, and then Mr. Cooper laughed, a big booming sound. "Well, that is honest at least. I like her, Austin. She has spine." "She would also be affordable," Mr. Harrison pointed out. "The other candidates were asking for higher wages." "We should not choose based solely on cost," Reverend Matthews said mildly. "The children's education is paramount. But being able to afford to keep the school open is also important," Mr. Chen added. They debated for another 30 minutes while Willa sat in nervous silence. Finally, Austin called for a vote. It was 4 in favor of hiring her and 1 against, with Mr. Sullivan abstaining. "Miss Zimmerman," Austin said formally, "the board is pleased to offer you the position of teacher for Laramie School. The term begins in 3 weeks on September 1st. Your salary will be $40 a month with the school year running through May. Do you accept?" "Yes," Willa said, her voice catching with emotion. "Yes, I accept. Thank you, gentlemen. I promise you will not regret this decision." As they left the church, Austin walked beside her in comfortable silence for a few minutes before saying, "You did well in there. I knew you would." "I cannot believe it. A week ago I was in Boston with no prospects. Now I am a teacher in Wyoming. How does it feel?" "Terrifying. Wonderful. Like I am standing on the edge of something vast and unknown," he smiled. "That is a good description of the West in general. Everything here is vast and unknown, but that is what makes it exciting." They reached the boarding house too soon. Willa did not want the evening to end, but she could not think of a reason to prolong it. "Thank you for walking me home, Austin, and for vouching for me tonight." "It was my pleasure, truly." He hesitated, then added, "Willa, I know you just arrived and you have much to prepare for the school term, but I was wondering if you might like to see my ranch sometime. It is beautiful country out there, and I think you would enjoy it." "I would like that very much." "How about Sunday? I could pick you up after church, show you around, and we could have lunch. Mrs. Rodriguez, my housekeeper, is a wonderful cook." "You have a housekeeper?" "Yes, her husband works for me as foreman. They have a house on the property. They have been with me for years." "Then yes, I would love to see your ranch on Sunday." His smile was bright even in the dimming light. "Good. I will look forward to it." The next 2.5 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Willa worked her shifts at the boarding house, but every spare moment was devoted to planning her lessons for the school year. Austin had arranged for her to visit the schoolhouse, a single-room building at the edge of town. It had a pot-bellied stove, rows of simple desks, a large slate board, and shelves of worn books. It was perfect. She inventoried the supplies, made lists of what was needed, and began planning curriculum. She would have students of all ages from 6 to 15, all in one room. It would be challenging, but she was determined to make it work. Sunday arrived bright and clear. Willa attended church services, sitting with Mrs. Chen. The small church was surprisingly full, and she noticed Austin sitting several rows ahead. He wore a clean pressed shirt and had his hair neatly combed. When he turned and caught her eye, he gave a small nod and smile that made her pulse quicken. After the service, he approached with his hat in his hand. Ready to see the ranch, very ready. His wagon was waiting outside, a sturdy vehicle pulled by two matched horses. He helped her up onto the seat with a hand that was strong and warm, and she noticed again how he smelled of soap and something spicy like cedar. The ride out of town was beautiful. The late summer landscape was golden and green, with mountains rising blue in the distance. Austin pointed out landmarks, telling her stories about the area. He had come to Wyoming 7 years ago with almost nothing, worked as a ranch hand for 3 years, saved every penny, and then bought his own land. He had built his ranch up slowly, carefully, focusing on quality cattle and good horsemanship. You ever regret leaving wherever you came from? Willa asked. Texas? No, I had nothing there but bad memories. My parents died when I was 14, and I worked various ranches until I had enough to strike out on my own. Coming to Wyoming was the best decision I ever made. I think coming here might be mine, Willa said softly. Even though it did not turn out the way I planned, he looked at her seriously. Can I ask you something? And you do not have to answer if you do not want to. All right. What was he like, Gerald Patterson? In his letters, I mean. What made you willing to marry a man you had never met? Willa considered her answer carefully. He seemed kind, stable. He talked about wanting a companion, someone to share his life with, not just someone to cook and clean. He wrote about books he had read, about the beauty of Wyoming, about building a future together. It sounded good, safe, after watching my father fade away from grief after my mother died. I wanted safety and purpose. And now I have purpose at least, the teaching position, and I am making friends. Mrs. Chen is wonderful, and the other women I have met at church have been welcoming. But not safety, she laughed. I suppose I have that too. Why do you ask? Because you deserve both. You deserve purpose and safety and more. You deserve to be happy. The intensity in his voice made her turn to look at him fully. His eyes were fixed on the road ahead, but his jaw was set in a determined line. Austin, what are you saying? I am saying that I know we have only known each other for 2 weeks. I know it is fast, maybe too fast. But I also know that from the moment I saw you struggling with that trunk in the street, something in me recognized something in you. And these past weeks, getting to know you, watching you work hard and face your challenges with courage, it has only made that feeling stronger. Willa's heart was pounding. What feeling? He pulled the wagon to a stop and finally turned to face her. The feeling that you might be the answer to a question I stopped asking years ago. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, I could be the answer to one of yours too. Austin, you do not have to say anything now. I just wanted you to know. Whatever you decide, whether you want to build a life here alone or whether you might consider building one with someone with me, I will respect it. But I had to tell you how I feel. I had to be honest. For a moment, Willa could not speak. Finally, she said, I came here to marry a man I had never met because it seemed like my only option for survival. But these past weeks, I have realized I can survive on my own. I can make my own way. So if I did decide to build a life with someone, it would not be because I need to. It would be because I want to. And what do you want, Willa? She looked at him, really looked at him. At the kindness in his eyes, the strength in his hands, the patience in his bearing. She thought about how he had helped her without asking for anything in return, how he had vouched for her to the school board, how he had taken time to check on her and make sure she was settling in well. I want to know you better, she said finally. I want to understand what building a life with you would mean. I want to see your ranch and meet your people and learn about your dreams. And then, maybe, I will know what I want." He smiled, and the relief in his expression was palpable. "That is all I am asking for. A chance." The ranch, when they arrived, was even more beautiful than Willa had imagined. The house was a solid structure of wood and stone, built to last. There was a large barn, several corrals where horses grazed, and in the distance she could see cattle dotting the hillsides. Everything was neat and well maintained, speaking of care and pride and ownership. A woman came out of the house as they pulled up, small and round with kind eyes and gray-streaked black hair. "You must be Miss Zimmerman," she said in accented English. "I am Maria Rodriguez. Welcome to the Stark Ranch." "Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. It is beautiful here. Come, come. I have lunch ready. You must be hungry from the drive." Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. The main room had a large stone fireplace, handmade furniture, and windows that let in plenty of light. There was a kitchen, a dining area, and doorways leading to what Willa assumed were bedrooms. "Austin built much of this himself," Maria said with obvious pride. "He is good with his hands, works hard. My husband says he is the best boss he has ever had." They ate lunch at a table near the window. Simple but delicious food. Roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from Maria's garden. The conversation flowed easily, with Maria asking Willa about Boston and teaching, and Willa asking about life on the ranch. After lunch, Austin gave her a tour of the property. He introduced her to his foreman, Miguel Rodriguez, a weathered man with a ready smile who clearly respected Austin greatly. She met several of the ranch hands, saw the horses Austin was breeding, and learned about his plans to expand the cattle operation. "You have built something remarkable here," Willa said as they stood on a rise overlooking the valley. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "It has taken years and there is still much to do. But yes, I am proud of it. It is a good life, Willa. Hard work, but honest. There is something satisfying about working with the land and the animals, about building something that will last. I can see that. I can see why you love it." He turned to her, backlit by the setting sun. "I would like to share it with you, not just for an afternoon, but as a life. I know it is soon, and I know you need time. But I am putting my cards on the table so you know where I stand. I would like to court you properly, Willa Zimmerman, with the goal of marriage, if that is something you might consider in time." Willa's breath caught. In another situation, she might have found this overwhelming. They had known each other for only 2 weeks, but there was something about the West, about the wide open spaces and the way people had to be direct because life was too short and too hard for games. "Yes," she said quietly. "Yes, I would like that." His smile was like the sunrise. He took her hand gently, his rough rancher's palm warm against hers. "Then we will take it slow. No rushing. We will learn each other properly, and if at any point you decide this is not what you want, you tell me and we stay friends. Deal?" Deal. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Willa had experienced in Boston. There, courtship had been formal, constrained by social rules and chaperones and propriety. Here, it was simpler and more honest. Austin came to town twice a week, always finding time to see her. Sometimes it was just a brief conversation after church. Sometimes he took her to dinner at the hotel restaurant. Once, he brought her a bouquet of wildflowers that he admitted sheepishly he had picked himself. They talked about everything. She told him about her childhood, her parents, the bookshop her father had run that had slowly failed as his grief consumed him. He told her about growing up rough in Texas, about learning to work hard because there was no other choice, about the dream of having his own place that had driven him north. 3 weeks into the school term, Willa invited him to visit her classroom. The children were curious and shy at first, but Austin had a natural way with them. He talked about ranching and horses, answered their eager questions, and even gave several of the older boys advice about working with livestock. "You are good with them," Willa said after school let out for the day. "I like children. Always thought I would have a houseful someday." He said it casually, but there was weight behind the words. How many is a houseful? Oh, 4 or 5 at least. Enough to help run the ranch, enough to make the place feel alive. But that is just dreaming. What about you? "Do you want children?" "I do," Willa said. "I always imagined having a family. It is part of why I became a teacher, I think. I love being around children, helping them learn and grow." They were walking slowly back toward the boarding house, and Austin reached for her hand. They had progressed to hand-holding in public now, a declaration that they were officially courting. Willa liked the solid warmth of his hand in hers, the way her fingers fit perfectly between his. "Willa," he said, "I know we agreed to take things slow, and I meant that. But I also want you to know that every day I spend with you, I become more certain that you are the woman I want to build that house full of children with. When you are ready, when you are sure, I will be waiting." She squeezed his hand. "I'm getting more certain every day, too." October brought cooler weather and the first hints of the coming winter. The mountains were capped with snow, and the aspen trees turned gold. Willa had settled into her life in Laramie with surprising ease. Her students were progressing well, and she had even started a reading circle for the women in town, meeting every other week to discuss books borrowed from the few libraries in the area. Austin had become a constant in her life. He still lived at the ranch, but he made sure to see her several times a week. They had fallen into comfortable patterns: dinner on Wednesday evenings, Sunday afternoon visits to the ranch, and stolen moments whenever he came to town for supplies or meetings. One Saturday in mid-October, he surprised her by arriving with a wagon packed with supplies. "I am taking you on an adventure," he announced. "What kind of adventure?" "The best kind. Trust me." She did. So she told Mrs. Chen she would be gone for the day and climbed up beside him. They drove west out of town, following a rutted track that led into the mountains. The air grew cooler and crisper, scented with pine and earth. They stopped at a clearing beside a small lake, surrounded by evergreens and golden aspens. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and Willa gasped when she saw it. "How did you find this place?" "I came across it years ago while tracking a lost calf. I come here sometimes when I need to think. I wanted to share it with you." He unpacked the wagon, revealing a blanket, a basket of food from Maria, and even a bottle of wine. They spread the blanket near the lake and sat together, eating and talking and simply enjoying the peace. "I love teaching," Willa said, lying back to look at the sky through the tree branches. "But I have to admit, I love this too. The quiet, the beauty, the wildness of it." Austin lay down beside her, careful to keep a respectful distance. "That is the thing about the West. It gets in your blood. You start to need the wide spaces, the big sky. Going back east would feel like suffocating now. I cannot imagine going back. This is home now." "Home," he repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." They stayed there until the sun was low in the sky, talking about dreams and plans and possibilities. As they packed up to leave, Austin caught her hand and pulled her close. "Willa, can I kiss you?" Her heart leaped. They had been courting for 2 months, but he had been scrupulously respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. Now, looking into his eyes in the golden afternoon light, she knew she was ready. "Yes," she whispered. He bent his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and perfect. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and she leaned into him. her own hands resting on his chest where she could feel his heart beating as fast as hers. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Willa Zimmerman. I think I have from the first moment I saw you in the street with your torn map. You looked so determined, so brave, and I knew I wanted to be part of your story." "I love you too," she said, and it was true. Somewhere in the past 2 months, amid the courtship and the conversations and the building of trust, she had fallen deeply in love with this kind, strong, patient man. "I love you, Austin Stark." They kissed again, longer this time, and Willa felt something settle into place inside her, like the final piece of a puzzle clicking home. The ride back to town was quiet, but it was the comfortable silence of two people who understood each other. At the boarding house, Austin helped her down from the wagon and held her close for a long moment. "I want to marry you," he said into her hair. "I want you to be my wife, the mother of my children, the partner of my life. But I also know you have your teaching position and your independence, and I will not ask you to give that up unless you want to." Willa pulled back to look at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean that if you want to keep teaching after we are married, I will support that. The ranch is only 5 miles from town. We could make it work. Or if you decide you want to focus on building our home and starting a family, I will support that too. Whatever you want, Willa. This is your choice as much as mine." Tears pricked her eyes, but they were happy tears. "You would really let me keep teaching?" "Let you? You are not mine to let or forbid anything. You are your own person. I just want to be the person you choose to share your life with." She kissed him again, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. When they broke apart, she was smiling through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Austin Stark, and I want to finish this school year because I made a commitment to these children. But after that, I think I am ready to focus on our family. I want those 4 or 5 children you talked about." His whoop of joy startled her into laughter. He picked her up and spun her around right there in the street, not caring who saw. When he set her down, he was grinning like a fool. "We are getting married," he said, wonder in his voice. "You are going to be my wife." "I am going to be your wife," she repeated, and it felt right, felt perfect in a way nothing in her life had felt since before her mother died. They decided on a December wedding after the first semester of school ended. It would give them time to prepare and would also avoid the worst of winter. The whole town seemed excited about the upcoming nuptials, and Willa found herself swept up in preparations. Mrs. Chen helped her make a wedding dress, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored silk that they ordered from Denver. Maria Rodriguez insisted on making the wedding cake, and the women from the reading circle organized a reception to be held at the church hall. November passed in a blur of lessons and wedding plans and stolen moments with Austin. They were careful to maintain propriety, conscious of Willa's position as a teacher and the scrutiny that came with it. But every moment they spent together only deepened their love and their certainty that they were making the right choice. The day before school let out for winter break, Willa was surprised when all her students' parents came to the classroom. They presented her with a beautiful quilt, each square made by a different family, a wedding gift and a thank you for her work with their children. "We were worried when Miss Porter left," Mrs. Harrison said, "but you have been wonderful for our children. They love coming to school now, and we see how much they are learning." Willa hugged the quilt to her chest, overwhelmed. "Thank you all so much. Teaching your children has been the greatest joy." The wedding was set for December 15th. The days leading up to it, Willa felt as if she was floating. She finished her lessons, organized everything for the teacher who would cover the second semester while she settled into married life, and packed her belongings at the boarding house. Mrs. Chen was philosophical about losing her helper. "I knew you would not stay long," she said as they folded Willa's clothes into her trunk. "From first day I could see you were meant for more than working in boarding house. And Austin, he is good man. You will be happy." "I owe you so much," Willa said. "If you had not taken me in, I do not know what would have happened to me." "You would have found a way. You are a strong woman, Willa. You survive, you thrive. This is just your next chapter." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold. Willa dressed in her cream silk gown with hands that shook only slightly. She had no family to attend, no father to walk her down the aisle, but she did not feel alone. Mrs. Chen and Maria helped her with her hair and dress, acting as the mothers she no longer had. The church was full when she arrived. It seemed the whole town had turned out for the wedding. She saw her students in the front rows, scrubbed clean and smiling. She saw the members of the school board who had taken a chance on her. She saw the ranch hands from Austin spread, dressed in their best. And at the front of the church, she saw Austin. He was wearing a new suit, his hair neatly combed, and when he saw her walking down the aisle, his face transformed with joy and love. Willa walked toward him steadily, her eyes locked on his, and when she reached him and took his hand, she felt complete. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony. They spoke their vows clearly, promises to love and honor and cherish, to face whatever came together. When Austin slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, Willa felt the rightness of it down to her bones. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Matthews said with a smile. Austin cupped her face gently and kissed her, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. When they broke apart, they were both grinning. "Mrs. Stark," Austin said softly. "Mr. Stark," she replied, loving the sound of it. The reception was joyful and loud, full of food and music and dancing. Willa danced with Austin, with Miguel Rodriguez, with Mr. Chen, with half the men in town. She laughed and ate cake and accepted congratulations until her cheeks hurt from smiling. As the sun set, Austin spirited her away to the wagon. They were spending their wedding night at the ranch, and Willa felt nervous anticipation flutter in her stomach as they drove through the darkening landscape. The house was warm when they arrived, fires burning in both the main room and the bedroom. Maria and Miguel had discreetly made themselves scarce, staying in their own house for the night to give the newlyweds privacy. Austin led Willa inside and then stopped, suddenly looking as nervous as she felt. "I know we have talked about this, but I want you to know there is no pressure. We can take as much time as you need." Willa smiled and reached up to cup his cheek. "I am nervous," she admitted, "but I am also ready. I love you, Austin, and I want to start our life together in every way." He kissed her then deeply, his arms coming around her to pull her close. She melted into him, her own arms wrapping around his neck. The kiss grew more heated, and she felt his hands at the buttons of her dress, careful and gentle. "Are you sure?" he asked one more time. "I am sure." They moved to the bedroom, and Austin was patient and careful, making sure she was comfortable every step of the way. There was some pain, but mostly there was closeness and tenderness and love. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big bed, and Willa felt happy in a way she never had before. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," he whispered back. "Thank you for taking a chance on me on this life. Thank you for being my destination when my map was torn." He laughed and pulled her closer. "Always, I will always be your destination, Willa. And you will always be mine." The winter passed in a haze of happiness. Willa settled into life on the ranch, learning the rhythms of the days and seasons. She helped Maria with the house, learned to ride horses, and even began to understand the cattle business. Austin included her in all his decisions about the ranch, valuing her input and insights. Spring came, and with it, wonderful news. Willa was pregnant. Austin was over the moon, already planning for the nursery and talking about names. They spent warm evenings sitting on the porch, watching the sunset and planning for their growing family. "Boy or girl, what do you hope for?" Willa asked one evening, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Healthy," Austin said immediately. "That is all I care about. But if I am being honest, maybe a boy first. Someone to help me run the ranch someday. And if it is a girl, then she will be the most loved girl in Wyoming, and she will probably be able to outride and outrope any boy in the territory." He grinned. "Either way, we win." In October, Willa went into labor. It was long and difficult, and Austin nearly wore a hole in the floor with his pacing. But when Maria finally emerged to tell him he had a healthy son, his joy was boundless. They named him Thomas, after Willa's father. He had Austin's dark hair and Willa's green eyes, and from the first moment Austin held him, he was utterly besotted. "He is perfect," Austin whispered, cradling the tiny bundle with surprising gentleness for such large, work-roughened hands. "You are amazing, Willa. Thank you for this gift." Willa was exhausted but happy, watching her husband with their son. "We made him together. He is ours." Motherhood suited Willa. She loved every moment with Thomas, even the sleepless nights and the endless work. Austin was a devoted father, always ready to help, taking turns walking the floor when Thomas was fussy. The ranch continued to prosper. Austin's careful breeding program was paying off, and they were able to hire 2 more hands. The house felt full and alive in a way it never had before. When Thomas was 18 months old, Willa discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Grace. She had blonde hair like her mother and her father's gray-blue eyes. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help take care of her. The years flowed past, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. When Grace was 2, Willa had another son, Samuel. 2 years after that came another daughter, Rose. And finally, when Willa was 32, their youngest was born, a boy they named Daniel. 5 children, just as Austin had dreamed of. The house was always full of noise and laughter and life. The children grew up learning to work on the ranch, learning responsibility and resilience. Thomas showed a natural talent for working with the horses, while Samuel loved the cattle. Grace surprised everyone by showing a head for figures, and began helping her father with the ranch accounts. Rose was the wild one, always off exploring, and Daniel was still too young to show where his talents might lie. Willa watched her children grow with a heart so full it sometimes felt like it might burst. She had never imagined this life when she stepped off that stagecoach with her torn map all those years ago. She had been looking for safety and security, a practical arrangement to survive. But Austin had given her so much more. He had given her love and partnership and a true home. He had believed in her when she had barely believed in herself. He had shown her every day through his actions what it meant to be cherished. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin surprised her with a trip back to the lake where he had first told her he loved her. Maria and Miguel agreed to watch the children for the weekend, and they packed up the wagon just like that first time. The lake was just as beautiful, perhaps even more so in the autumn colors. They spread their blanket and sat together, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "You ever regret it?" Austin asked quietly. "Giving up teaching, the independence you had to become a rancher's wife?" Willa turned to look at him in surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. Why would you ask that?" "Sometimes I worry that I took you away from the life you might have had. You were so good at teaching and you loved it." "I did love teaching, but I love this more. I love waking up beside you every morning. I love raising our children together. I love the life we have built. Teaching was important to me, and maybe someday when the children are older, I will teach again. But for now, this is exactly where I want to be. I love you, Willa Stark. More now than I did the day we married, and I did not think that was possible. I love you too. You know, I sometimes think about that torn map, and I realize now that it tearing was the best thing that could have happened. If I had found Gerald Patterson's house, I would have married him out of desperation. I would never have known what real love feels like. The map brought you to me. Even torn, even when you were lost, it brought you exactly where you needed to be. She kissed him, long and sweet. You told me you would be my destination. You have kept that promise every day since. And I always will. They made love there by the lake, unhurried and tender, two people who knew each other completely and loved what they knew. Afterward, they lay together watching the clouds drift across the blue sky, talking about their dreams for the future. I want to expand the house, Austin said. Add on more rooms. The children are getting bigger and they need space. Plus, maybe someday we will have grandchildren visiting. Grandchildren, Willa laughed. Thomas is only 9. We have a while before we need to worry about that. Time goes fast, love. Seems like yesterday you were stepping off that stagecoach. 11 years. It has been a good 11 years, the best, and there are so many more to come. They stayed at the lake until sunset, then reluctantly packed up to return home. When they arrived, the children rushed out to greet them, full of stories about their weekend with Maria and Miguel. Willa hugged each one, breathing in their familiar scents, feeling grateful for every single one. That night, after the children were all in bed, she and Austin sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a quilt against the chill. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the sound of cattle lowing drifted on the breeze. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Stark," Austin said, kissing the top of her head. "Happy anniversary, Mr. Stark. To 10 more years, and 10 after that, and 10 after that. To growing old together. To the family we have made. To torn maps and new destinations." He laughed and pulled her closer. "To torn maps and new destinations." "I will always be grateful for that torn map, Willa. It brought me you. And you gave me everything I did not even know I needed. Not just a home, but a place to belong. Not just safety, but love. Not just survival, but true living." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars, hands intertwined. Inside the house, their children slept safely. Around them, the ranch they had built together thrived, and between them, the love that had started with a torn map and a kind gesture had grown into something unshakable. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of both joy and challenges. There were hard winters when they worried about the cattle. There were droughts that tested their resources. There were illnesses and injuries and the everyday struggles of raising 5 children and running a ranch. But through it all, Willa and Austin faced everything together. They were partners in the truest sense, making decisions jointly, supporting each other through difficulties, celebrating victories together. When Thomas turned 16, he announced he wanted to start his own breeding program for horses. Austin gave him a section of land and enough money for 3 good mares, and the boy threw himself into it with passion and dedication. By the time he was 20, he had built it into a successful business of his own. Grace shocked them all by announcing she wanted to go to university to study business. She was 17, brilliant and determined, and Austin never even considered saying no. They sent her to Denver, and she returned with knowledge that she used to help modernize the ranch's operations. She introduced new bookkeeping methods and helped them expand their markets. Samuel followed in his father's footsteps, taking naturally to every aspect of ranching. By the time he was 18, he was essentially running the day-to-day operations, leaving Austin more time to focus on the business side and planning for the future. Rose was the adventurer, and at 19, she married a surveyor and moved to Montana. It was hard for Willa to let her go, but she saw the joy in Rose's eyes when she talked about exploring new territories, and she could not hold her back. Daniel, the youngest, surprised them all by showing a gift for teaching. When he was 15, he started helping some of the younger ranch hands learn to raid, and by the time he was 18, he was talking about becoming a teacher himself. "He gets that from you," Austin said one evening as they watched Daniel working with one of the new ranch hand sons, patiently helping the boy sound out words. "Maybe," Willa said, "but he gets his patience from you. We made good children, you and I. We did. I am so proud of them, Austin. Each one of them is finding their own path. That is because you encouraged them to. A lot of folks would have tried to force them into a mold, but you always let them be who they were meant to be." Willa leaned against him, still fitting perfectly into his side after all these years. "We are getting old, you know. Speak for yourself. I am in my prime." He flexed his arm playfully and she laughed. "You are 48 years old, and still strong as an ox. I can still outwork any hand on this ranch. I am not doubting your strength. I am just saying we are not the young couple we once were." He turned serious and took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. "No, we are better. We have history now, Willa. We have weathered storms together and come out stronger. We have built something that will last beyond us. Our children will inherit this ranch and maybe their children after them. That is legacy. I never thought about legacy when I stepped off that stagecoach with my torn map. I was just trying to survive. And look what you built instead. Not just survival, but a thriving life." "You amaze me, Willa Stark. You have amazed me every day for the past 23 years. 23 years. It hardly seemed possible. Willa was now 41 and Austin 48. Their oldest was 22 and their youngest 13. The house had gone from bursting with small children to hosting young adults making their own way in the world. But through all the changes, one thing remained constant: the love between Willa and Austin. It had matured and deepened, becoming something solid and unshakable. They knew each other's moods and thoughts, could communicate with just a look, and still found joy in each other's company after all these years. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party. The whole town turned out, it seemed, to celebrate the couple who had become pillars of the community. Mrs. Chen was there, now quite elderly but still sharp. Maria and Miguel were there, having become like family over the years. The school board members, though many had changed, were there to honor the woman who had once been their teacher. Thomas stood up to make a speech, tall and confident, so much like his father. "My parents have shown us what real love looks like. Not the easy, romantic kind you read about in stories, but the kind that lasts. The kind that works through problems, that forgives mistakes, that chooses each other every single day. They have built not just a successful ranch, but a home full of love. And all of us here are better for having known them." There was not a dry eye in the room when he finished. Willa clutched Austin's hand, overwhelmed with gratitude for this life, this family, this community. That night back at the ranch, she and Austin sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. The stars were bright, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage and earth. 25 years, Austin said wonderingly. A quarter of a century, and it has gone by in a blink. The best 25 years of my life. Everything before I met you seems like a different lifetime, like it happened to a different person. Do you ever think about what would have happened if that map had not torn, if you had found Patterson's store? Sometimes, but I cannot really imagine it. That path led to you, Austin. Everything led to you. He pulled her close and kissed her forehead. I was so lonely before you came, Willa. I had the ranch, I had work, I had respect. But I was lonely in a way I did not even fully recognize until I met you. You filled up all the empty places. You did the same for me. I was so scared that day, standing in the street with that torn map. I felt like I had made a terrible mistake coming west. And then you appeared and everything changed. I looked at you and knew. I did not know what I knew exactly, but something in me recognized something in you, like finding the other half of myself. They sat in peaceful silence, wrapped in each other and their memories. Inside the house, they could hear Daniel practicing his reading lessons, preparing for his entrance exam to the teacher training program. Their life together continued to unfold, season by season, year by year. 5 more years passed, bringing them to their 30th anniversary. Thomas was married now to a lovely girl from a neighboring ranch, and they had given Willa and Austin their first grandchild, a little girl named Emily. Grace had married a businessman from Denver and was expecting her first child. Samuel was courting seriously, and even Rose had written that she was engaged to a man she had met in Montana. Only Daniel was still unmarried, focused on his teaching career. He had started at a school in town, and Willa glowed with pride every time someone mentioned what a wonderful teacher he was. "You were right all along," Austin said one day as they watched little Emily toddle around the yard, "about having a house full. 5 children felt like so many some days, but now that they are grown and starting their own families, I find myself missing the chaos. We have grandchildren now to fill the house," Willa pointed out, "and I have a feeling there will be many more before we are done." She was right. Over the next several years, grandchildren came in a steady stream. Thomas and his wife had 3 more children. Grace had twin boys. Samuel married and quickly had 2 daughters. Rose came back for visits with her growing brood. Even Daniel eventually fell in love with a fellow teacher and married, though they chose not to have children, focusing instead on the students they taught. Willa and Austin's house became the gathering place for the family, especially on holidays. Thanksgiving and Christmas saw the house bursting with children and grandchildren, the noise and laughter echoing off the walls. "This is what I imagined," Austin said one Christmas, watching his descendants open presents and play games. "This is exactly what I dreamed of when I built this house all those years ago." Willa smiled and squeezed his hand. He was 70 now, his hair gone completely gray, his face lined with age. But his eyes were still that striking gray blue, and when he looked at her, she still saw the young man who had picked up her trunk in the street. She was 63, her own hair more gray than blonde now, her face bearing the marks of a life well lived. But she still felt young when Austin held her, still felt beautiful when he looked at her. They had been married for 42 years, and every year had been a gift. One spring evening, when Willa was 68 and Austin 75, they sat on their porch swing as they had done thousands of times before. Austin was moving slower these days and his joints ached in the cold, but he still insisted on helping with the ranch work, even though Samuel was fully in charge now. "I have been thinking," Austin said slowly. "About what?" "About that torn map. About how you came here lost and afraid and I told you I would be your destination. I remember. You kept your promise." "I did. But Willa, you became my destination too. Every path I walked led me to you and this life we built. You were not just my wife, you were my partner, my best friend, the reason I got up every morning. You still are." "Austin Stark, are you getting sentimental in your old age?" He laughed, but it was soft. "Maybe. When you get to be as old as I am, you start thinking about what matters. And all that matters is this. You, our children, our grandchildren, the life we made together. Nothing else matters at all. Willa felt tears prick her eyes. I love you. I have loved you for 47 years, and I will love you until I take my last breath. And beyond that too, I hope. I like to think we will find each other again, even after this life is done. They sat together as the sun set, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of pink and gold, just like it had on countless evenings before. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and peaceful, a testament to their hard work and dedication. Their children were happy and successful. Their grandchildren were growing strong and healthy. The legacy they had built would continue for generations. And at the center of it all was the love between two people who had found each other through chance and choice, through a torn map and a kind gesture, through patience and commitment and daily decisions to choose each other. Willa thought back to that terrified young woman stepping off the stagecoach, clutching a torn map and wondering how her life had gone so wrong. If she could go back and tell that young woman what lay ahead, she would not believe it. The joy, the love, the family, the home, all of it was beyond anything she could have imagined. But she would also tell that young woman to trust in the kindness of strangers, to take chances on love, and to believe that sometimes the destination you need is not the one you planned for. Austin kissed the top of her head, and Willa closed her eyes, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her. Her destination, her home, her love. The years continued to flow gently by like water in a stream. Austin passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, with Willa holding his hand. She mourned him deeply, but she also felt grateful for every single day they had shared together. 52 years of marriage, 52 years of love. It was more than many people ever got. She lived another 8 years after he was gone, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the ranch in the early days, about the Wild West that was slowly fading into memory and legend. When she died at 91, peacefully in her sleep just like Austin, the whole town mourned her. She was laid to rest beside her husband on the hill overlooking the ranch, and the tombstone read simply, Willa Stark, beloved wife, mother, and teacher. But what it did not say, what could not be contained in stone, was the full story of a woman who had come west with nothing but hope and a torn map, who had been met with kindness by a cowboy who became her destination, and who had built a life beyond her wildest dreams. Their children ensured that the ranch stayed in the family, passing it down through the generations. The Stark Ranch became one of the most respected in Wyoming, known for quality cattle and fine horses, but also for being a place where family came first, where hard work was valued, and where love was the foundation of everything. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Wyoming hills painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the Starks who walked the land would feel the presence of their ancestors, the cowboy and his bride who had started it all, and they would remember that the best destinations are not found on any map, but in the hearts we give freely to those we love. The legacy of that torn map and that chance meeting lived on, not just in the land and the buildings and the success of the ranch, but in the love that had been planted there and had grown into something that could never be destroyed, something that would last as long as there were Starks to remember and to carry forward the values that Willa and Austin had lived by. Love, partnership, kindness, hard work, family, home. These were the true treasures they had found, and these were the gifts they passed down through the generations, more valuable than any gold or silver, more lasting than any monument of stone. And so the story that began with a torn map and a cowboy's kind words ended not with an ending at all, but with a continuation, a legacy that would ripple forward through time, touching lives yet to be born, proving that one act of kindness, one choice to love, one decision to build a life together could change the world in ways both large and small. The torn map had led Willa exactly where she needed to be, and Austin had kept his promise, becoming her destination in every way that mattered, just as she had become his. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of love to transform lives and build futures that stretched far beyond what any map could show.